global nicotine crackdown. It's happening in the United States. It's happening in the European Union. It's happening all over the place. Nicotine is being regulated. It's being banned. It's being forced into the shadows of society. All the while, psychedelics, cannabis, marijuana, it is being deregulated, pushed, advocated for at lightning speed. Why is that? Well, we're going to get into that today. Welcome to American Made here on X American News. I'm your host, Andrew Muller. I am a contributor at thenewamerican.com. I'm also the COO, of Liberty Sentinel Media. You can check us out at Liberty Sentinel. That's SENTINEL.org. And today we're going to be talking about nicotine because the show's called American Made. And those who made America really did, in a true sense, live off nicotine. I mean, they were smokers. They were users of the tobacco. Now, I will say, big disclaimer before we get into this whole discussion of nicotine, I do not endorse chewing tobacco. I do not endorse smoking or vaping because there are health side effects to that, right? Smoking does cause cancer. Chewing tobacco can cause cancer. Vaping has its own set of problems. But what I want to talk about is nicotine in the purest sense of the substance. It's an alkaloid. It's a naturally occurring substance. Now, when you add pyrazines to it, or you smoke it and insert combustion into your lungs, or you use chewing tobacco, which sometimes has micro versions of fiberglass to cut your lips and get it into your bloodstream, that is not nicotine, right? That's the surrounding problems with smoking or chewing tobacco. When I talk about benefits or the crackdown of nicotine, I'm talking about the substance itself. So if I speak of nicotine throughout this episode in a positive manner, I'm not talking about smoking. I'm not talking about chewing tobacco. I'm not talking about vapes. I'm talking about nicotine as a pure substance. So with that out of the way, I want to get into what nicotine is. Well, it's an alkaloid, right? And an alkaloid is a substance that occurs in plants. And we know that nicotine is mainly in the tobacco leaf, but it's also in nightshade plants. So this would be tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, things of that nature. Now, nicotine is in those things to a much smaller extent than it is tobacco leaves, for example, but it's a naturally occurring substance. Now, the elites have been suppressing nicotine for many, many decades. Actually, in January of 2025, at the very end of Joe Biden's presidency, one of the last things he did, believably, just days before Donald Trump was inaugurated, was he asked the FDA to regulate nicotine. The Biden era rule sought to, this is what it said, quote, establish a, quote, maximum nicotine level in tobacco products. The FDA, in a press release, said they would cap the nicotine level at 0.7 milligrams per gram of tobacco in cigarettes. So they wanted to limit the amount of nicotine in cigarettes. Now, you see, they're not going after cigarettes as a whole. They're going after the nicotine in particular, limiting it to 0.7 milligrams per gram. And this is one of the last things Biden did. Typically, when you're president and you're a lame duck president and you're heading out, that's when you do the crazy stuff, right? That's when you pardon your son for any crime committed between a massive period of time. You wouldn't think you would do something as seemingly insignificant as limiting nicotine. And yet that's one of the last things he did. Very interesting. Now, the FDA regulation Biden did, it was just mainly for chewing tobacco, cigarettes, and, like cigars and things like that. But it didn't touch, at the beginning at least, non-tobacco products like nicotine patches, pouches, gums, etc. But Democrats have been pushing for the regulation of non-tobacco nicotine products for literally decades. In 2024, Chuck Schumer, of course, our resident Democrat in the Senate, he had a press conference where he talked about nicotine pouches. Now, this isn't cigarettes, it's not vapes, it's not chewing tobacco, it's nicotine pouches. For those who don't know, nicotine pouches are just these little pouches of nicotine. They're placed between the upper lip or the bottom lip, and it really is just pure nicotine. That's all there is to it. There's no real reason to believe this causes cancer. They say it's addictive. I use it personally. I have for over a year. I don't believe it's addictive. It has a lot of benefits to it, in my opinion. And yet Chuck Schumer's cracking down on it. Here is what Chuck Schumer said. It's a pouch packed with problems. Here's Chuck.
Pouch packed with problems. High levels of nicotine. So today I'm delivering a warning to parents. because these nicotine pouches seem to lock their sights on young kids, teenagers, and even lower, and then use the social media to hook them.
Senator Schumer is urging the FTC and the FDA to investigate Zen for concerns relating to marketing and health effects. We reached out to Zen for comment, but have not yet heard back.
So that is what Chuck Schumer said. Now, Zyn, I happen to have a tin here. I'm not a big fan of Zyn. I think Zyn is a sin. I much rather prefer Alp, Tucker Carlson's brand. However, Chuck is going after nicotine and their manufacturers, which is very interesting. He called on the Federal Trade Commission and the FDA to investigate nicotine companies for concerns relating to marketing and health effects. Now, he's focusing on the kids, and that seems to be the main thread we see here, is that those going after nicotine, it's for the children, it's for the children. And yet all the while they're pushing 70 plus vaccines on children. They're pushing horrible psychological tools on children. They're encouraging children to become transgender and mutilate their own bodies. So we know it's not really about the children. The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. Now, a couple more Democrat attacks on nicotine, and Republicans aren't exempt from this either, but the Democrats just have more examples. Kathy Hochul, the Democrat governor of New York City, she just recently, just days ago, unveiled her proposed budget for 2027. In it included a 75% tax on non-tobacco nicotine products, pouches, patches, gum, etc. In the budget, it says this, quote, "The executive budget defines alternative nicotine products and broadens the tobacco products definition to include them." So we're including nicotine now, like the pouches and the patches in the gum, into tobacco products, bringing these under the state's existing 75% wholesale tax. So that is what they're proposing. Other states and cities have proposed even up to 90+% sales tax on nicotine. So what in the world is going on? Of course, it's for the kids, right? The New York Department of Taxation and Finance Acting Commissioner Amanda Hiller said in a statement regarding the budget, quote, "We have high taxes to create a barrier to entry for children." That's always been a core rationale for having some of the highest taxes on these products in the country, end quote. Now, the UK has done the most flagrant, in my opinion, crackdown on nicotine. Just days ago, they agreed to, both houses of parliament, a final text, a final piece of legislation that would literally ban the purchasing of tobacco for anybody born after 2008. In England, they agreed to this. If you are born after January 1st, 2009, you are prohibited, if it is agreed to, and it looks like it will be, from buying tobacco for the rest of your life. The UK's health minister, Baroness Morone, commented that, quote, "It is in fact the biggest public health intervention in a generation, and I can assure all noble lords it will save lives," end quote. Yeah, it is the biggest public health intervention perhaps ever. New Zealand also attempted a smoking ban of this nature in 2022, but they quickly reversed it upon the election of their new prime minister, Christopher Luxon, who was concerned about the repercussions on the economy and also black market sales. But we see this happening all over the place. Australia has also introduced prescription nicotine programs, where if you want to get nicotine, you have to have a prescription. It's ridiculous. Now, the World Health Organization at a global level, so we looked at Chuck Schumer, Kathy Hochul, Australia, England, New Zealand, and what they've done. The World Health Organization, this is the health arm of the United Nations, which the United States pays over a third of the budget. The organization founded literally by communists and Nazis. They said that nicotine is horrible, and they actually have a no tobacco day, a world no tobacco day. They launched this in 1988. And just this past year, they focused on non-tobacco nicotine products. Again, the pouches, the gum, the non-tobacco products in their crusade to stop nicotine. This is what they said at one of the last World No Tobacco Day press releases. Quote, "Companies are aggressively marketing new and emerging nicotine products such as e-cigarettes, nicotine pouches, and synthetic nicotine devices, often disguised as innovation," the World Health Organization says, "to sustain addiction and recruit new users. These strategies threaten to reverse hard-won gains in tobacco control and public health." Well, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't listen to the World Health Organization for public health advice, because they are the ones who pushed the poisonous clot shot on the world, which has killed literally more people than we can probably count. Now, of course, many nations participate in this World No Tobacco Day, and the United Nations, through the WHO, demanded that policymakers strengthen regulation and close policy gaps for the sales of nicotine to protect the kids, right? And of course, the UK's ban on that falls right in line. So that's the war on nicotine we're seeing right now. All the while, marijuana and psychedelics are surging. So we see this global push, no nicotine, but all the while, marijuana is being pushed. Now, Chuck Schumer, who opposed nicotine, has been a fan of marijuana. And that's an interesting comparison I've noticed while I've researched this, that a lot of the anti-nicotine types are also very pro-marijuana. Well, that's fascinating. There's a reason to that, I believe. We'll get into it. So Chuck Schumer, you remember him, pouch packed with problems. In 2022, he co-sponsored the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. This was introduced by Cory Booker. And the act would, quote, decriminalize and deschedule cannabis, end quote. It would also provide expungement of prior marijuana offenses. Now, that push to reschedule marijuana has also been affirmed by the Trump administration. We'll get into that. Now, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, remember, 75% sales tax on non-nicotine products. She has also been helping the cannabis industry and the marijuana industry. She announced a plan just recently to create centers for excellence for cannabis care and health equity that would increase access to medical marijuana for minority groups. Very fascinating. And then, of course, just weeks ago, President Trump signed an executive order accelerating access to psychedelic drugs. This was at the behest of Joe Rogan, who, of course, is a known pot smoker. The order states that, quote, the Food and Drug Administration has granted breakthrough therapy designation to specific psychedelic drugs, and there are numerous products currently in the clinical pipeline for review of safety and efficacy, end quote. Now, Trump doing that comes in light of another executive order he signed in December 2025, which ordered the Attorney General to lower marijuana from a Schedule I substance, which means it's not accepted for medical use, to a Schedule III, which is accepted for medical use. The order also called for further research more broadly into THC and CBD for common everyday ailments. So this just isn't for those who maybe want to use weed for, post-traumatic stress disorder, they have Parkinson's or something. Like, this is getting to the point when you read the language of these texts with regards to THC and CBD, that they want to use these for everyday ailments. So, maybe you have anxiety, maybe you're depressed. You could use THC and CBD for common everyday ailments, but nicotine, nope, can't do it. Too bad. This week, AG Todd Blanche finished that job of rescheduling marijuana by ordering the FDA to do it in line with Trump's 2025 December executive order, making it a Schedule III substance. Now, I'm no fan of marijuana. I know a lot of libertarian-minded people like it. I get it, understood, but I've heard all the arguments. You can comment it down below if you'd like. I've heard it all. I'm not going to change my mind. I just don't think marijuana is good for you. I don't think it's a good substance, but that's just my opinion. But there's a lot of facts that show perhaps why Democrats and certain elitists would be pushing marijuana while fighting nicotine. Well, Boston University School of Public Health revealed in a study that men who use marijuana one or more times a week are twice as likely to have a miscarriage in a pregnancy compared to those who use marijuana less than once a week or not at all. Harvard Medical School has also published materials linking marijuana to cognitive decline, laziness, and easiness to manipulate and control. So you see, marijuana could potentially, and this is just my opinion, but marijuana could potentially be a force that's being used by the elitists to make people more controllable, make them lazy, and it could also aid in the depopulation agenda, which would help the New World Order crowd, the Bill Gates crowd, the World Health Organization crowd, with their effort to curb world population. If it is indeed increasing the chances of infertility and miscarriage by 50%, you can't rule that out. But nicotine does really the opposite than marijuana. Nicotine boosts cognition. Nicotine makes you more alert. Nicotine makes you more aware. There are studies that even show that nicotine could prevent Parkinson's and Alzheimer's if used chronically. Nicotine, some have suggested, raised testosterone. So that's one substance, on the other hand, boosted cognition, potentially boosting testosterone, lowering the chances of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And then on the other hand, you have weed, which makes you lazy, makes you subdued, easy to control, lowers fertility, increases miscarriages. And the elitists are pushing for that, and at the same time regulating and taxing nicotine from here to Timbuktu. Just fascinating. Just observe it. So it's not nicotine that's the problem, right? All these people say, well, we got to stop it for the kids. We got to save the kids. We got to tax it because of the kids. But nicotine is not carcinogenic. This is something that is revolutionary. A lot of people don't even know this. But nicotine is not carcinogenic, which means it's not cancerous. The Agency for Research on Cancer and the U.S. Surgeon General do not and will not classify nicotine as a carcinogen. Health and Human Services Director Robert F. Kennedy Jr. further has even been on the record saying nicotine is not carcinogenic. Even speaking to the addictiveness of nicotine, in 1994, 7 CEOs from the top tobacco companies testified before Congress under penalty of perjury, I might add. And they were asked by Representative Ron Wyden, who was a Democrat from Oregon, if they believed nicotine was an addictive substance. All 7 firmly answered they believed it was not. And 2 years later, all 7 of those CEOs of major tobacco companies were under federal investigation for lying under oath because they said, we don't believe nicotine is addictive, but no evidence was found to prove them guilty. So the biggest CEOs of the tobacco industry went before Congress under oath and penalty of perjury, and they said nicotine is not addictive. The feds investigated them. You think the feds would want to go after the top 7 tobacco CEOs, and they couldn't debunk the claim. So that's fascinating. Now, what are some of the potential benefits of nicotine? Well, for decades, it's been studied that nicotine, when properly consumed, can serve as an anti-inflammatory agent, can prevent Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, boost cognition. In a 1991 paper, Murray Elias Jarvik, a neuroscientist and co-developer of the nicotine patch, discovered a plethora of benefits from nicotine use. He said in a paper that, quote, nicotine in tobacco brings illness and death to millions of people, talking about cigarettes, chewing tobacco, etc. He continued, yet nicotine in its pure form has the potential to be a valuable pharmaceutical agent, end quote. So you see, by binding the cholinergic nicotine gauging site on cationic ion channels in receptors throughout the body, nicotine can actually stimulate various neurotransmitters, breaking the blood-brain barrier in ways that other pharmaceuticals cannot. Jarvik continued in his research paper and noticed that using nicotine chronically over your life through non-smoking methods could result in protection against Parkinson's disease, Tourette's, Alzheimer's, ulcerative colitis, and even sleep apnea. Regarding cognition and anti-inflammatory benefits, a 2024 paper available in the National Library of Medicine stated this, quote, recent research has revealed nicotine's broader cognitive enhancing and anti-inflammatory properties, suggesting its potential therapeutic applications in several conditions, end quote. In 2023, researchers looked at nicotine in COVID-19, and they discovered that, quote, using nicotine patches to combat long-haul COVID seems far superior to the time-consuming, often underwhelming or disappointing, costly and complex rehabilitation measures currently available to these patients, end quote. So nicotine has a lot of benefits, and honestly, not enough studies have been done on this. And I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will do more studies. He himself is a nicotine pouch user, as is a lot of people in the Trump administration. And it's kind of become trendy, right? In the influencer culture on the right wing, the podcast sphere, nicotine has kind of become a fad, if you will. You have Nick Nack, which is a Christian nicotine lozenge company. They sponsor Joel Webbin and Candace Owens. You have, Alp, which sponsors a lot of people. You have, Zyn, which has been mentioned on, Theo Vaughn's podcast. You have a lot of prominent people using nicotine pouches nowadays. And I'm sure there is some undue hype around it. I get that. But there are a lot of benefits that need to be looked into, just anecdotally. I've had plaque psoriasis. I've struggled with it as an anti-inflammatory agent. I've taken nicotine and it has helped. I've known people who have had chronic back pain, things of that nature, taken nicotine. It has helped through mainly, the form of nicotine pouches. So I think there's a lot of potential here to look into. Of course, we know that, normal tobacco use of consuming nicotine has its issues, but I think the pouches, the patches, gum, lozenges, there's a lot of creative ways to get nicotine without a lot of the issues. And Tucker Carlson's really been a disciple of this, an apostle of this. He actually went down to Australia just last year and noticed the Australian edicts regarding nicotine. And he said to a speech full of people in an arena, quote, nicotine has the byproduct of raising testosterone levels and making people a little harder to command. That's a massive threat. I would highly recommend nicotine to every person in this room. It's a life-enhancing, God-given chemical. That's just my view, end quote. Michael Knowles, of course, over at the Daily Wire, he noted, and I think very accurately, that, quote, marijuana makes you lazy, dumb, passive, which I agree. He said nicotine, on the other hand, makes you more alert, makes you think quickly and clearly. It's not a party drug, end quote. So ultimately, the jury's still out on nicotine. We don't know everything about it, but I do think it's fascinating that you have Chuck Schumer, Kathy Hochul, all the Democrats, the World Health Organization, the tyrants over in Europe, the tyrants in New Zealand, the tyrants in Australia, taxing, regulating, prohibiting, banning nicotine. And they're starting with, of course, cigarettes and all this stuff. But when you look at the documents they're passing, like the bill in England that both houses of Congress or Parliament, just agreed to, it says tobacco, etc. They are building a infrastructure. They are building the stepping stone for it to be an all right ban. Pouches, patches, gum, it's going to be their next step. And again, these are the people who are pushing mass vaccination, mass fluoridization of our water, mass pharmaceutical drugs on the masses. They don't care about the deaths regarding the COVID jab. They don't care about issues with over pharmaceutical use. They don't care about the, psychedelic issues and the issues with psychology. They're just focusing on nicotine. And I think it's very telling that there could be something else here. So that is the episode. We will continue to follow this story. Of course, it's developing, but I do think it's worth talking about. I think there is a good chance that nicotine could be like the new ivermectin, right? You remember ivermectin, the Nobel-winning prize drug that's very cheap and has a lot of uses. The world went after that. They called it a horse drug. They called it a conspiracy theory drug. And yet it worked in treating COVID-19, and it was cheap, it was readily available, and it had very little side effects. Could nicotine be the next ivermectin? Possibly. Stay tuned here on X American News. I'm your host, Andrew Muller. This has been American Made. You can check out the article I wrote on this subject at thenewamerican.com. I did a deep dive in it. If you want to read it, share it with friends. That's thenewamerican.com. The title of the article is Global Push to Ban Nicotine as Marijuana and Psychedelics Praised. Thank you for watching. God bless you all. Until next time, keep